What is real charity? When people are in trouble, say after disasters, or simply when people are poor, Americans' instinct is to think, how can government help? After all, who will help those people if not government? We libertarians argue that private charity would step in, individuals freely choosing to help. But would enough of us help? Most people say no. And that's why liberals, like Newsday columnist Ellis Henican, say when it comes to helping the needy, that's mostly government's job?
Well, listen, it would be great if people all reached into their hearts and solved all these horrible problems we have, but history teaches us that that doesn't happen. In almost every single case where there is a government program, it exists because the private efforts that you and I both admire weren't enough.
Well, it's because politicians said they weren't enough and we could do better, but I would argue that if government didn't take so much of our money, the private sector would take care of these problems.
Hold on a second, John. For instance, look at older Americans, right? They used to be the poorest sector of our society, and then something called Social Security came along, and Medicare came along, and now older people really do comparatively fairly well. Before food stamps, we had hungry kids spread all across America. Those numbers were cut dramatically by that, despite all the generous churches and nice people like the ones who approached you on the street and gave you a nickel.
These programs are trillions in debt. They're unsustainable.
Well, I mean, maybe we have to tweak them, but you can't throw away the idea. What is the reality that we need government in there, too?
Food stamps, a couple billionaires could fund that whole food stamp program by themselves. And a private charity would be better at saying who really needs the food help and who's scamming the system.
You know what? I'd love that. If you know a billionaire who wants to pay the entire expense of food stamps, I think we would welcome that.
They don't step in because your big, fat government is there. And people say, oh, well, government does that.
You see, here's, I think, the reality in real life is that all these private efforts are really important. We're very generous people. We give a lot of money. But when the chips are really down, when the big thing happens, when the typhoon hits the Philippines, we love the Red Cross effort, but you know what? They don't have an aircraft carrier with Marines on board and rescue helicopters. The U.S. military does. I want them steaming toward the Philippines when that typhoon hits.
I don't know what's going to happen in the Philippines. In Haiti, our government promised billions of dollars. $1 billion of it hasn't gotten to the people in Haiti. The New York Times says they were going to build 15,000 homes. Latest target, fewer than 3,000.
Listen, if your argument is that government sometimes doesn't do a perfect job, and sometimes even does an awful job, I concede that.
I want to play a longer version of that clip I showed earlier. Two of my left-wing colleagues were talking about how after a disaster, faith-based charities were better at disaster relief than FEMA.
There's FEMA, and then there's the faith-based FEMA.
If you're waiting for the government, you're going to be in for an awful long wait.
So this is Harry Smith and Brian Williams talking about the government response after the tornado in Moore, Oklahoma in May, and how 30 churches banded together and helped much more quickly and did a better job than government. This happened at Katrina, too. FEMA was turning away Walmart's free water while people were trying to get water, and FEMA was sending its water to the wrong place.
You're right. Listen, as you know, I'm a native of New Orleans, so I feel that one kind of personally. And you're right. There's some things that the privates do well. I mean, there are all those kids, wonderful young people who came down and church groups. They did some things much better than government. But there was still an awful lot of things that we needed government for. Remember how angry folks were when FEMA was slow to get there? No one said stay away. They said get here quicker.
And Walmart and private charities got there.
And you know what? And so maybe one of the things that the privates can do is be a little more nimble, a little quicker. But boy, if you're talking about rebuilding the Gulf South in America, I don't think you want the government to take a pass.
I do. Let's talk about the war on poverty. Lyndon Johnson said he would end poverty. So here's where the war began in America. It's the poverty rate. And sure enough, dropped sharply the first 5-7 years after that. But then it stopped improving. We taught people, government programs teach people to be dependent. And look what was happening before the war on poverty. Americans were lifting themselves out of poverty. Government continued the progress for 5 years and then stopped it.
We should have been more generous with these programs. We should have done the other things that government can do to help folks.
Oh, gosh. You don't think
wanna
we
give
teach?
up?
Government doesn't teach dependency?
No, listen, I am not here saying government is perfect. Government has some bad things. It's clumsy, it's bureaucratic, it has some waste and corruption in it. I'm just saying that there are things it does really well and things the privates do really well. And the test is, hey, private folks, step up.
I think these graphs are the test. Look, can we put these up? The rise of food stamp use in America. Now, you would say this is because more people are hungry, the recession, but it goes up steadily. The two lines refer to, one is the number of people collecting and the other is the cost. We're teaching people to be passive.
I grant you that's something we want to avoid. But so what's the solution? Should we look at those hungry people and say we're going to take your food stamps away and just hope for the best? Hope the food pantry down the block
We should limit
kicks in?
these programs and let the private sector step in. One more example is the rise of disability payments to people. Straight up. So you got fewer people doing manual labor, medicine is better, and more people are disabled?
John, I got to tell you, I'm with you on that.
Agreement on one thing. Well, you want to get rid of it? I'll play your own question.
No, I don't want to get rid of it. I mean, I think that we could certainly look a lot more closely at some of those applications.
Let's cut it way back. There's a place near here called a job center,
Okay.
a government office supposedly to help people find jobs.
Okay.
I went there. People said, there are no jobs. I've looked for jobs. I have to get my welfare here. We then went around and within a couple hours found 40 job offers, 28 entry-level positions. One restaurant owner said, I'd hire a dozen people if people would just apply. How many could come with no experience?
I would take like 9. Probably would take 9 and train them.
And at the welfare office, people told us there are no jobs.
No, there's plenty of jobs.
These government jobs offices encourage people to take welfare. I had somebody go and ask for help, see if they'd help her get a job, and they said, no, they just steered me toward welfare and food stamps.
Yeah, listen, again, it's much smarter to have programs that encourage people to work, that don't reward laziness, that are
But
effective.
they all do that.
Oh, I don't know.
Private charities know who needs a push and who needs help.
But the answer can't be to just cut it back, can it?
Yeah, I think cut it back and invite the private sector in. But we'll stop there. Ellis Henican, thank you.